What I'm about to share with you is a true story. At first, it might sound like something straight out of a movie, but every detail is real. And it all began in a restaurant, with a girl no one noticed, until the night she spoke in flawless Arabic and stopped a $350 million scam. Hello family, if you're ready for the full story, make sure you hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Tomorrow, I've got another story that will blow your mind, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Now let's dive in. The restaurant wasn't the kind of place where people looked twice at the staff. Guests came in to be dazzled by the glittering chandeliers, the gleaming glass walls, the faint scent of saffron and roasted lamb floating in the air. Waiters and waitresses in black aprons drifted in and out like shadows, their voices hushed, their movements precise. To the rich patrons, they were invisible. And yet, one of those shadows carried a secret no one could have guessed. Her name was Alina Brooks, 17 years old, still in high school, and working nights to help her mother keep the lights on at home. Most nights, her world was a cycle of scribbling homework on the subway, tying her curly hair into a bun before clocking in, and praying no customer spilled wine on her uniform. But inside, Alina carried something more. She had taught herself languages, starting with French, then Spanish, and eventually Arabic. What began as an online fascination had turned into a full obsession. She would stay up long past midnight, her headphones on, repeating phrases she barely understood until the rhythms made sense. Over the years, it became effortless, natural, even flawless. Still, she never told anyone. To her classmates, she was just that quiet girl. To the customers, she was just a waitress. Her secret talent lived in the margins of her notebooks and the files on her old laptop. That night, Alina was balancing 3 plates of steaming lamb shank when she first noticed him. He walked into the restaurant like he was stepping onto a stage, though he carried himself with quiet dignity rather than arrogance. His tailored suit was midnight blue, his cufflinks glinting under the lights. The maitre d' nearly tripped over himself, bowing as though royalty had entered. Behind him trailed 3 men in slick suits, each smiling too wide, their hands heavy with gold watches. They looked less like businessmen and more like predators circling their prey. Alina didn't know who he was at first. All she saw was a man with presence, tall with a neatly kept beard, his eyes sharp but tired, as though the weight of the world sat on his shoulders. Later she would learn his name, Sheikh Khalid Al-Rami, a billionaire from the Gulf, rumored to be investing heavily in US tech. But at that moment, he was just another customer. As Alina served table after table, she caught fragments of his world. The men with him leaned in close, speaking in quick bursts of Arabic before switching back to English whenever the sheikh seemed uncertain. She wasn't paying attention at first. Her job was to keep glasses filled and plates cleared, not to eavesdrop. Yet something about the way they spoke snagged her attention. They used words she recognized, phrases her late-night study sessions had etched into her brain. Words like tazwir, forgery; macadam, advance payment; ittifaq mumtaz, excellent deal. The way they smiled as they slid a thick folder across the table set her pulse racing. She tried to focus on her tray, on the clink of glassware, on the orders shouted from the kitchen. But the words echoed in her ears, louder than the noise of the dining room. Meanwhile, Sheikh Khalid studied the papers in front of him with a frown. He had seen contracts like this before, too many times, in too many countries. But these men came highly recommended. The figures looked tempting, the profits astronomical. He felt the old battle inside him, his instinct telling him caution, his loneliness whispering, just trust someone for once. For all his wealth, trust was the one thing he could never buy. Alina passed by again, balancing another tray. And that's when she heard it. One of the men muttered in Arabic, "He won't know until it's too late. By then, the money is ours." Her foot nearly faltered mid-step. Her breath caught in her throat. Did she just hear that right? The tray trembled in her hands. She forced herself to keep walking, placing drinks down at another table. Her heart pounded. She knew Arabic well enough to be certain. They were planning something dangerous, something that could ruin him. And yet, she hesitated. Who was she to intervene? A 17-year-old waitress? Would anyone even believe her? Back at the sheikh's table, the men leaned closer. One tapped the papers with a manicured finger. "All it needs is your signature, Sheikh. A deal of a lifetime." Khalid's pen hovered over the dotted line. His eyes narrowed. He glanced at their grins, at the way they almost looked hungry. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't place it. Then, as if carried by a force larger than herself, Alina's voice broke the air. Clear. Sharp. In perfect Arabic. This is a fake. The words sliced through the restaurant's hum like a knife. Glasses clinked. A fork dropped. Every head turned toward her. Her tray nearly slipped from her hands as she realized what she had just done. Her co-workers stared, mouths open. A customer at a nearby table let out a gasp. But it was the Sheikh's reaction that froze her in place. His pen stopped mid-stroke. Slowly, he raised his gaze, locking eyes with her. His expression, first shock, then something sharper, something alive, made her knees tremble. "Repeat that," he said, this time in Arabic. His voice was low, commanding, almost dangerous. Alina swallowed hard. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "It's a forgery," she answered, again in flawless Arabic. The three men stiffened. Their faces drained of color, eyes darting between her and the Sheikh. One stammered, "She doesn't know what she's talking about, she's just a waitress." But the Sheikh wasn't looking at them anymore. His focus was on her, this girl who had been invisible minutes ago, now standing like a storm in the center of his life. And that's how it all began. A teenage waitress who wasn't supposed to matter. A Sheikh who wasn't supposed to trust anyone. And one moment of truth that would change both of their lives forever. If you were Alina, 17, broke and invisible, would you have spoken up, knowing no one might believe you? Or would you have stayed silent? Comment below. I'd love to know what you'd do. The room seemed to stop breathing after Alina's words. The chandeliers hummed faintly overhead, forks hovered midair, and the only sound was the Sheikh's chair creaking as he leaned back ever so slightly, studying her. The three men at his table froze like statues caught in a spotlight. Alina's heart thundered so violently she thought it might burst. She could still feel the smooth edge of the tray pressing against her palms, but her hands were shaking so hard the glasses rattled. She had done it. She had spoken. And now there was no going back. Khalid's gaze was sharp, intense, like the eyes of a hawk fixed on prey. But there was no cruelty there, only calculation. His Arabic was deep, commanding, and resonant. "You speak Arabic?" he asked. Alina's throat felt dry as sand. She wanted to run, to hide, to vanish into the kitchen and never be seen again. But she also knew this was no time to back down. "Yes," she whispered, her accent flawless. Fluently. His eyes narrowed, skeptical but intrigued. "And you claim these men are deceiving me?" Alina glanced at the three suited figures. One of them, a tall man with slicked-back hair and a gold watch the size of a fist, sneered at her. "She's lying, Sheikh Khalid," he snapped. "A child pretending to know things beyond her place. This is absurd." The others chimed in, their voices frantic. She misheard. "She doesn't understand business. Don't let a waitress interfere in a multi-million-dollar deal." But Khalid lifted a hand, silencing them without a word. His attention was still on her. "Explain," he ordered. Alina swallowed hard. Her knees felt like water, but she drew in a shaky breath and forced herself to meet his gaze. "They said it's a forgery," she began in Arabic, her voice trembling at first but growing steadier. "They spoke of Tazwir. They said you wouldn't realize until it was too late. And then the money would be theirs." The room buzzed with whispers. A nearby diner covered his mouth in shock. Another waitress froze mid-step, her eyes wide with disbelief. Khalid turned slowly toward the men, his expression unreadable. "She says you are thieves," he murmured, also in Arabic. "That your contract is false." The tall man laughed nervously. "She's fabricating this to make herself important. Sheikh, surely you don't believe a waitress over us." But Alina caught it, the flicker of fear in his eyes, the way his fingers tapped nervously on the table. She pressed on, desperation carrying her voice. "Look at page 7, she urged. "The numbers don't match. They shifted decimals, changed clauses. It's a scam. Please, you must see it." Her words, raw and urgent, hung in the air. Khalid reached for the folder with slow, deliberate movements. The papers whispered as he flipped through them. His sharp eyes scanned the figures, pausing on page 7. Silence. Then his lips pressed into a thin line. He set the folder down with a soft thud. "She is right," he said quietly. The men blanched. "Impossible," one barked. "She's just enough." Khalid's voice cut like steel. The entire restaurant seemed to bow under its weight. "Do you take me for a fool? To present me with this garbage and think I would not notice?" The tall man stuttered, sweat beading at his temple. "Sheikh, we can explain." Guards. Two security men in dark suits materialized almost instantly, as if conjured from the shadows. They moved toward the three scammers with swift precision. Chairs scraped as the men protested, but within moments they were being escorted out, their voices drowned by the murmurs of shocked diners. The scam had collapsed. And yet, as the men were dragged away, Alina stood frozen, her tray still trembling in her grip. The sheikh turned to her once more, his eyes softer now, though still assessing. "You saved me from a loss of $350 million, he said slowly, switching to English so the room could hear. "Do you understand what you have done?" Alina shook her head faintly. I couldn't stay quiet." Her co-workers gaped at her like she had grown wings. One of them whispered, "Since when does she speak Arabic?" Another muttered, "She's going to get fired for this." But Khalid ignored them all. He rose from his chair, towering over the table, and stepped closer to Alina. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath again. "Who taught you Arabic?" he asked, his voice softer now. Alina hesitated. She could have lied, said a teacher, or a school, but the truth slipped out before she could stop herself. "I taught myself." Khalid's brow furrowed, and for the first time, something like admiration flickered in his eyes. The manager, red-faced and flustered, hurried over, wringing his hands. "Sir, I deeply apologize for this disruption. This girl, she overstepped, she shouldn't have." Khalid silenced him with a glance. "This girl," he said firmly, "just prevented a scam that would have cost me a fortune. And you would dismiss her?" The manager's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He stammered, "Of course not, Sheikh, of course not." But Khalid was no longer looking at him. His gaze was still fixed on Alina. Alina's chest rose and fell rapidly. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her trembling. Part of her wanted to shrink back into invisibility, to disappear into the kitchen and let this entire moment vanish like smoke. But another part of her, the part that had spoken up, refused to back down. For the first time in her life, someone powerful was looking at her as if she mattered. Khalid finally spoke again, his tone quieter, almost intimate despite the room full of onlookers. "You have courage," he said, "and a gift. But tell me, why risk yourself for a stranger?" Alina blinked. She hadn't even thought of it that way. Why had she done it? Instinct? Justice? The sheer impossibility of staying silent while a lie unfolded? She found herself answering in a whisper, her eyes shining with something raw. "Because the truth deserves a voice." Khalid studied her for a long moment. Something in his chest shifted, something he hadn't felt in years. Trust. The restaurant slowly resumed its rhythm, though hushed, with whispers trailing in every corner. People would talk about this night for weeks. The waitress who spoke Arabic, the sheikh nearly scammed, the way millions hung on a thread. But for Alina and Khalid, the world had already tilted. This was no longer an ordinary night. This was the beginning of something neither of them could name yet, something far more dangerous, and far more precious. That night, long after the scammers had been escorted out and the restaurant returned to its glittering calm, Alina found herself alone in the alley behind the restaurant, her apron still tied, her hands still trembling. The door opened softly behind her. Khalid stepped out, his suit immaculate, his expression unreadable in the dim light. For a moment, they stood in silence, two worlds apart, drawn together by a single act of truth. "You are not invisible," he said quietly, as if reading her soul. And then, without waiting for her reply, he walked away into the night. If you were in Khalid's shoes, would you trust Alina after this, or would you suspect she had her own motives? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious how you'd see her. The restaurant closed later than usual that night. The staff shuffled about, stacking chairs, wiping down tables, and gossiping in low, urgent voices. Everyone had witnessed it, the impossible moment when a 17-year-old waitress spoke flawless Arabic and stopped a billionaire sheikh from being swindled. But not everyone saw it as heroic. Alina kept her head down as she scrubbed the counter. The manager had already hissed at her, "What you did was reckless, completely out of line. You embarrassed this establishment." His eyes had darted nervously toward the private dining room where Sheikh Khalid still lingered with his bodyguards, reviewing papers. "You're lucky he didn't demand your dismissal on the spot." Alina said nothing. Her chest still buzzed with leftover adrenaline. She couldn't explain what had compelled her to speak up. It was as if the words had ripped out of her before she had a chance to stop them. Now, the weight of it pressed down on her shoulders. What if she had misunderstood? What if she had just risked everything, for nothing? Her co-workers weren't helping. "Since when do you speak Arabic, Alina?" one sneered as she tied her apron. "Yeah, what are you trying to prove?" another added. "Think you're smarter than everyone else?" "She just wanted attention," muttered a third. "A little nobody trying to shine." Their words stung more than she expected. She had spent years in silence, hidden, her gift locked away. The one time she dared to use it, suspicion followed. Maybe they were right. Maybe she should have stayed invisible. In the dining room, Khalid sat stiffly, the remnants of the ruined meeting spread across the table. His men hovered nearby, waiting for his word. He had dismissed the scammers with cold efficiency, but the aftertaste of betrayal lingered bitterly on his tongue. It wasn't the first time men had tried to steal from him. In fact, it had become a pattern. Wealth drew wolves, and trust was a currency he no longer spent freely. And yet, that waitress. The way she had spoken, unflinching, flawless Arabic, still echoed in his mind. He could hear the conviction in her voice, the fire in her eyes when she said, "Because the truth deserves a voice." Part of him admired her courage. Another part warned him it could have been an act. What if she was planted there by someone else? What if this was another layer of deception, more cunning than the rest? He rubbed his temple. Trust was dangerous. Trust could kill. The following evening, Alina returned to work as usual. Her life couldn't afford a pause. Rent still needed paying. Her mother's medication still needed buying. She tied her apron, kept her head low, and told herself to forget the sheik, forget the scammers, forget the fact that for one fleeting moment she had felt seen. But the restaurant buzzed differently tonight. Word had spread. Guests whispered, staff stole glances at her, some with admiration, others with suspicion. She felt the heat of their eyes wherever she moved. Halfway through her shift, the maitre d' hurried up to her, nearly tripping over his polished shoes. "He's back," he whispered, his eyes wide. Alina's stomach dropped. And sure enough, when she peeked toward the private section, there he was again, Sheikh Khalid. Alone this time, his bodyguards posted discreetly near the walls. His presence filled the space like gravity itself. She told herself to avoid him, to stay focused on her tables. But fate had other plans. A sharp gesture from the maitre d'. "You. Table 12. Now." Her tray shook as she carried a pot of tea toward him. Each step felt heavier, like wading through water. When she reached his table, she bowed her head slightly. "Tea, sir." Her voice was barely more than a whisper. Khalid studied her, his expression unreadable. He let the silence stretch until she thought she might shatter under it. Finally he spoke, his voice deep and steady. "You risked much last night." Alina glanced up, startled by the softness in his tone. "I couldn't stay quiet." "Many would have," he countered. "Most would have turned away." Her grip tightened on the tray. "Maybe they don't know what it feels like to be invisible." Something flickered across his eyes. For a moment, she thought she saw understanding, but just as quickly it was gone. The silence between them grew dense, heavy with unspoken questions. Khalid leaned back in his chair, regarding her carefully. "Do you expect a reward?" Alina blinked. "What?" $350 million, he said flatly. "That is what you saved me from losing. Many would consider such a deed worthy of payment." Her cheeks flushed hot. "I don't want your money." "Then what do you want?" The question stunned her. What did she want? To be believed. To be valued. To be something more than a waitress scraping by. But how could she say that to a billionaire who lived in a world she could never enter? "I just wanted the truth to be heard," she murmured. Khalid studied her a moment longer, then gave a short nod. perhaps. But the doubt lingered in his eyes, and she felt the sting of it. No matter what she said, no matter how genuine her heart, he wasn't ready to believe her. Over the next week, their lives orbited each other uneasily. Khalid returned to the restaurant more than once, always at the same table, always alone. His eyes followed her, but his words remained few. Alina, for her part, tried to ignore him. She poured tea, cleared dishes, answered politely. But every time she felt his gaze on her, her heart fluttered traitorously. Yet behind that flutter was fear. Fear that he doubted her. Fear that she had stepped into something far bigger than she could handle. Her co-workers continued their whispers. "She's chasing him," one snickered. "Trying to hook a billionaire." "She's playing with fire," another warned. "People like him don't mix with people like us." The gossip sliced at her, but she said nothing. One night, as the staff filed out after closing, Alina lingered behind, sweeping the floor. She didn't hear the footsteps until a voice spoke softly behind her. "You doubt yourself." She spun around. It was him. Khalid. His presence filled the empty restaurant like a storm cloud. She began, but her voice faltered. "You think you overstepped," he continued. "That you should have remained silent." Tears pricked at her eyes. She hated how easily he read her. "Maybe I should have. Maybe it wasn't my place." Khalid stepped closer, his gaze intense. "And yet, had you stayed silent, I would have been ruined." Her chest rose and fell rapidly. "But you still don't trust me, do you?" His silence was answer enough. The tension between them stretched taut, a fragile thread ready to snap. For Khalid, trust was a fortress built high and thick. To let someone in, especially a stranger, especially a girl from another world, felt like exposing his deepest wound. For Alina, being doubted was the wound. Her whole life had been a chorus of disbelief. You can't, you won't, you're nothing. And now, even after saving him, the disbelief lingered in his eyes. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. That night, as Khalid left the restaurant, he glanced back once. Alina stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, watching him disappear into the night. Both of them retreated into their own worlds, hearts heavy, walls still standing. Neither was ready yet to admit how much they wanted to tear those walls down. Do you think Khalid is right to be cautious about trusting Alina, or do you think his mistrust is only hurting them both? Comment your thoughts. I'd love to see which side you're on. The storm broke on a Tuesday night. Not the kind of storm that rattled windows or flooded streets. This was quieter, more dangerous. The kind of storm that unfolded behind closed doors, whispered through phone calls, and lingered in the corners of powerful rooms. The scammers hadn't gone away. Khalid had thought ejecting them from the restaurant was enough, but men who smelled money rarely surrendered so easily. Within days, rumors swirled in business circles, rumors that Sheikh Khalid was arrogant, unstable, reckless with his wealth. False stories leaked online, contracts slipped mysteriously from his grasp. Deals that had seemed certain began to falter. Someone was retaliating. And he knew who. Meanwhile, Alina's life seemed unchanged on the surface. She still tied her apron each evening, still carried trays heavy with lamb shanks and saffron rice, still endured whispers from co-workers who didn't know what to make of her. But beneath her calm exterior, her stomach twisted with unease. Every time Khalid entered the restaurant, a shadow of tension followed him, as though he carried storms in his suit pocket. His eyes seemed sharper, his phone calls more clipped, his bodyguards more watchful. And every time his gaze found her, Alina felt that same unbearable pull, equal parts fear and longing. The breaking point came late one evening. The restaurant was half empty, the lull between dinner rush and closing. Alina was carrying a tray of tea to a small group near the back when she noticed the men. 3 of them. Suits sharp, eyes sharper. Not the same ones from before, but their kind was unmistakable. They sat too straight, spoke too softly, scanned the room too often. Her pulse quickened. When she passed closer, she caught it, Arabic, spoken under their breath. Phrases that turned her blood cold. He will be alone. Vulnerable. Tonight is the chance. Her tray shook. Tea sloshed dangerously in the cups. She forced her steps steady until she reached the kitchen, heart pounding like a war drum. They weren't done with him. They were planning something. She found him moments later, seated at his usual table, reading from his phone with a frown carved into his brow. "Sir," she whispered urgently, setting a glass of water before him. "Those men near the back, they're talking about you." Khalid looked up sharply, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice further, slipping into Arabic. "They said you'd be alone. That tonight was their chance." For a second, something like fear flickered across his features, but it hardened instantly into resolve. He rose from his chair, his bodyguards appearing at his side like shadows. One moved toward the back, murmuring into an earpiece. Alina stepped back, pulse racing. She had done it again, thrown herself into a storm that wasn't hers. But this time, instead of pushing her away, Khalid turned to her. "You're coming with me." Her breath caught. "What?" "You heard them. You're now involved. If they know you exposed them once, you are in danger too. My protection extends to you." Alina shook her head rapidly. "No, I can't. My shift, my manager." Khalid's tone brooked no refusal. "Your safety comes first. Gather your things." Minutes later, she found herself in the back seat of a sleek black car, the city lights flickering past the tinted windows. Khalid sat beside her, silent, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed out the window. The silence was suffocating. Alina clutched her bag in her lap, her mind a whirlwind. She had never been in a car like this. Never been this close to a man like him. Never felt so utterly out of place. Finally, she broke the silence. "You didn't have to do this." Khalid's gaze shifted toward her. In the dim light, his eyes looked darker, more dangerous. "I did. You don't understand the kind of men we are dealing with. They are not simply thieves, they are wolves. You stood against them. That makes you a target." Her throat tightened. "So now what?" "I just live in your shadow." His lips twitched, not quite a smile. "For tonight, yes." The car pulled into the driveway of a towering hotel, its glass facade glowing like a beacon against the night sky. Inside, the lobby glittered with marble floors and golden chandeliers. Guests turned their heads as Khalid strode through, Alina trailing awkwardly behind him like a sparrow following a falcon. He led her to a private elevator, his bodyguards fanning out discreetly. When the doors closed, silence pressed in again. Alina risked a glance at him. "You don't trust me," she murmured. His head tilted slightly. "I don't trust anyone." The words hit her harder than she expected. His suite was nothing like her world, vast windows overlooking the city, Persian rugs sprawled across polished floors, the scent of oud lingering in the air. Khalid gestured toward a sofa. "Sit." She obeyed, perching on the edge like she might break something by breathing too hard. He poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to her. Their fingers brushed briefly, a spark shooting through her chest. She looked up, startled. His eyes met hers, dark and unreadable. For a moment, the air between them felt charged, fragile. Then he cleared his throat. "Tell me, how did you learn Arabic?" She blinked. Of all the questions, she hadn't expected that. "On my own," she admitted softly. "Books. Online videos. Late nights when everyone else was asleep. I just wanted to understand a world that wasn't mine." His brows furrowed. "Why Arabic?" She hesitated, then said, "Because it's beautiful. Because it made me feel connected to something bigger. Something I belonged to, even if I didn't." His gaze lingered on her, as though searching for cracks in her words. But all he found was truth. The hours passed slowly. Khalid made calls, speaking in hushed tones, issuing orders to his men. Alina sat quietly, watching the city lights blink below. Every so often, his eyes flicked to her, as if to confirm she was still there. And though neither said it aloud, a fragile thread had begun to weave between them. Near midnight, Alina shifted on the sofa, exhaustion tugging at her eyelids. She hadn't planned to be here. She hadn't planned any of this. "Rest," Khalid said softly, noticing her struggle. "I should go home," she whispered. "It's not safe." Her throat tightened. "You really think they'd come after me?" His eyes darkened. "I know they would." Something in his tone sent a shiver through her. For the first time, she realized just how dangerous his world truly was, and how deeply she had stepped into it. Eventually, she drifted into sleep, curled awkwardly on the sofa. Khalid watched her for a long while, his phone silent in his hand. This girl, this waitress who should have been invisible, had now become entwined in his fate. He didn't know whether to curse it or to thank destiny. But one thing was certain. He couldn't let her go. If you were in Alina's place, suddenly pulled into the orbit of a billionaire whose enemies now saw you as a threat, would you stay close to him for safety, or run back to your ordinary life? Comment your answer. I want to know what you'd choose. The night stretched on endlessly in the chic suite. Alina woke with a start just before dawn, the city still glowing faintly below the vast windows. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The velvet sofa beneath her, the scent of oud, the low hum of silence, it all felt like a dream she had stepped into by mistake. Then she saw him. Khalid sat near the window, still in the same tailored suit from last night, though his tie hung loose, his posture slightly slumped. He was staring out at the horizon as if he could command the sun to rise by sheer force of will. She rubbed her eyes. You haven't slept. He didn't turn. Sleep is a luxury. One I rarely indulge in. The words were simple, but the weight behind them pressed heavy against the air. Alina sat up slowly, clutching the blanket he must have draped over her at some point. The gesture, so small, so quietly human, made something stir in her chest. Why do they want to hurt you? She asked softly. Khalid's shoulders tensed. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he rose, walking to a low cabinet where a decanter of amber liquid sat. He poured himself a glass, swirling it slowly before answering. Because power attracts envy. Because wealth breeds enemies. Because trust, when broken, is more dangerous than any blade. His tone was clipped, rehearsed, like he had said it 100 times before. But Alina wasn't satisfied. That's not all, she pressed. Finally, his eyes met hers. For the first time, she saw something raw flicker across his face, pain. He set the glass down and walked back to the window. I was not always untouchable. The words surprised her. Untouchable was exactly how he seemed, like a fortress in human form. My father built our fortune, Khalid began, his voice distant. Oil fields, investments, connections that spanned continents. When he died, I inherited everything, his empire, his enemies, and his mistakes. Alina leaned forward, listening intently. There was a man I trusted, Khalid continued. A brother in all but blood. He advised me, guided me, stood beside me in every deal. Until one day, I discovered he had been siphoning millions, bleeding my company dry while smiling in my face. His jaw tightened, his hand curling into a fist at his side. When I confronted him, he denied it. He called me paranoid, accused me of dishonoring our friendship. But the evidence was there, undeniable. In the end, I had him arrested. He cursed my name as they dragged him away. And since then, his voice trailed off, eyes darkening. Since then, I have trusted no one. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. Alina swallowed hard. Suddenly, his coldness, his suspicion, his refusal to believe in anyone, even her, made sense. It wasn't arrogance. It was a wound. I'm sorry, she whispered. His eyes flicked toward her. Don't pity me. It's not pity, she said quickly. It's understanding. Her words lingered in the air between them, fragile and earnest. For a moment, it seemed like he might brush them aside, but instead, he let the silence hold. Then Khalid's gaze shifted, sharp again. And you? Who is Alina, the waitress who speaks Arabic like a scholar? Who risks everything for a man she barely knows? She froze. The truth pressed against her chest like a weight. She had kept her story locked away for years, fearing judgment, ridicule, or worse. But something in his eyes, the fact that he had just bared his scars, urged her to do the same. She drew a shaky breath. My father was a translator. Languages were his life. Arabic, French, Spanish. He spoke them like music. I grew up listening to him, learning without even realizing I was learning. Her voice cracked slightly. When I was 11, he disappeared. Khalid's brow furrowed. Disappeared. She nodded. He was working a job overseas. One day, the call stopped. No explanations, no goodbyes. My mother waited by the phone for months, then years. But he never came back. Her eyes blurred with unshed tears. After that, I studied harder. I wanted to keep him alive, somehow. Speaking Arabic, it was like hearing his voice again. Like he was still here. The room went silent again, but this time the silence was softer. Shared. Khalid's expression shifted, the sharpness melting into something gentler, though no less intense. You learned a language for love, he said quietly. Alina wiped at her eyes. Or maybe for survival. People like me don't get noticed. We don't get chances. But languages, they open doors, even if only in my mind. Her confession hung in the air. For the first time she felt bare, exposed, not because she had been seen, but because she had allowed herself to be. And to her surprise, Khalid didn't look at her with doubt or judgment. He looked at her like he understood. The knock on the door broke the moment. One of his bodyguards entered, murmuring in Arabic about tightened security, suspicious activity nearby, precautions being taken. Alina caught only fragments, but enough to know danger was still close. Khalid dismissed the man and turned back to her. You see, he said softly. This is my world. A world where loyalty is rare, and betrayal is always waiting. It is not a world for someone like you. Alina straightened, her voice firmer than she expected. Maybe it's exactly for someone like me. Because I know what it feels like to be left behind. To be invisible. To have no one believe in you. And I won't do that to anyone else. Her words hit him like a blow, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. Hours passed, and as dawn painted the sky in streaks of gold, they sat together in the vast suite, two people from different worlds bound by shared wounds. Khalid spoke of his homeland, of deserts stretching endless under the sun, of nights where stars burned brighter than any city light. Alina spoke of her mother, of long nights spent working to keep the lights on, of dreams she had buried beneath survival. Piece by piece, they revealed themselves, not fully, not yet, but enough to glimpse the souls behind the armor. And in that fragile space, something unspoken began to grow. But fragility is dangerous. Because just when it seems safe to trust, the past has a way of clawing its way back. And both of them knew, neither of their stories was finished. If you had to choose between protecting yourself by staying guarded, or risking everything by opening up to someone who might hurt you, what would you do? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The city outside Khalid's suite glittered like scattered jewels, but neither of them noticed. They had spent the entire night speaking in fragments, sometimes in English, sometimes in Arabic, sometimes in the unspoken language of shared silence. By morning, Alina felt something she hadn't felt in years, lightness. She had expected to feel crushed by the Sheikh's presence, but instead, she felt steady. As if the weight of his own past had somehow steadied hers. Still, she knew this couldn't last. He was a billionaire, a man with power and enemies she couldn't imagine. She was just a girl who carried plates and wiped counters. And yet, when his gaze settled on her, none of that seemed to matter. They shared breakfast by the wide window, sunlight spilling across the table. Khalid's chef had delivered an array of dishes, fresh fruit, warm flatbreads, spiced eggs, dates drizzled with honey. Alina stared at the spread, wide-eyed. I've never seen so much food for just two people. Khalid raised a brow. You disapprove? She bit her lip, suddenly self-conscious. It just feels extravagant. He leaned back slightly, studying her. Extravagance is relative. To some, this is excess. To others, it is ordinary. To me, it is simply comfort. Alina hesitated, then reached for a piece of bread. In my world, comfort is paying rent on time. Making sure the lights stay on. Something flickered across his expression, not pity, but a deeper recognition. He tore a piece of bread for himself. Then eat, he said quietly. Eat until you feel comfortable. It shouldn't have felt like such a profound invitation. But it did. Later, as they sipped tea, Khalid surprised her by asking, What do you dream of, Alina? She blinked. Dream of? Yes. He gestured toward the window, where the city stretched endlessly. Beyond this. Beyond waitressing. Beyond survival. What does your heart want, if it could choose freely? The question stunned her. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked what she wanted, not what she needed. She stared into her cup. I used to dream of traveling. seeing the places my father spoke of, walking through markets in Cairo, listening to the call to prayer echo across rooftops, standing in the desert at night, under stars so bright it hurts. Her voice grew softer. But those are dreams for people with money, not for people like me. Khalid's eyes lingered on her. Perhaps, he said slowly, or perhaps those are dreams for people with courage. And courage, Alina, you already have. Her chest tightened at the unexpected warmth in his words. For the first time since she'd met him, she dared to smile. And to her shock, he smiled back. It wasn't the polished, guarded smile of a billionaire entertaining investors. It was smaller, realer, almost shy. It made him look younger, less carved from stone. The sight tugged something deep inside her. That afternoon, the suite grew quiet. His bodyguards remained outside, discreet and invisible. Khalid busied himself with calls, his voice switching fluidly between languages, Arabic, English, French. Alina sat nearby, listening, occasionally catching words she understood, marveling at the rhythm of his speech. When he finally ended the call, he caught her gaze and tilted his head. You understood some of that. She flushed. Maybe a little. His eyes glinted. Then test me. Speak. She hesitated, then slipped into Arabic. You carry your words like a sword. Careful, sharp. But sometimes, sharp things cut the hand that holds them. His brows lifted, clearly not expecting poetry. A moment passed, and then, he laughed. The sound startled her. It was deep, warm, genuine. Not the cold chuckle of irony, but the laughter of someone caught off guard by joy. I did not expect that, he admitted. Alina's lips curved, emboldened. Then maybe you don't know me as well as you think. His gaze softened, and for a brief, dangerous moment, it felt as though the walls between them were dissolving. Evening fell, and with it came a kind of peace neither had known in a long time. They sat side by side on the balcony, the city alive beneath them. Alina hugged her knees to her chest, the cool air brushing her skin. Khalid leaned against the railing, his posture more relaxed than she had ever seen. For a long time, they said nothing. Finally, she broke the silence. You're different than I thought. Oh, he asked, glancing at her. She nodded. When I first saw you, I thought, untouchable. Cold. A man who would never notice someone like me. And now. His voice was quiet, but loaded with meaning. Now I think maybe you notice too much. His lips curved slightly, but his eyes stayed serious. And you, Alina, are not as invisible as you believe. The words lingered between them, heavy with a meaning neither dared to name. For a heartbeat, the world shrank, just two people, a balcony, and the pulse of something dangerous but irresistible sparking in the air. Her heart thudded, her breath caught, her body betraying her calm exterior. And then, as if sensing the edge they teetered on, Khalid turned his gaze back to the city, his expression guarded once more. But the moment had already happened. That night, as she prepared to sleep on the sofa again, Khalid surprised her by saying, "You do not have to be afraid here." She looked at him, startled. His gaze held hers. As long as you are under my roof, no harm will come to you. Something in his tone made her believe him, not because of his wealth or his guards, but because of the raw conviction in his voice. For the first time in years, Alina allowed herself to feel safe. And with safety came something more dangerous. Hope. In the quiet dark, she lay awake, listening to the faint sounds of the city, the distant murmur of Khalid making one last phone call, the low hum of the sweet silence. And she wondered, was this what it felt like to belong, even if only for a night? But she also knew, bonds this fragile can break. And when they do, the shatter is always louder than the silence before it. When two people from completely different worlds start to truly see each other, is it bravery to let the bond grow, or is it foolishness because the world will pull them apart? Tell me your take in the comments. The fragile peace did not last. For 3 nights, Alina lived in the gilded cage of Sheikh Khalid's suite. She moved through rooms draped in velvet and marble, her footsteps muffled by thick rugs, her heart pulled taut by the strange mixture of safety and longing that lived in his presence. She knew it wasn't permanent. She knew her life was a rental space she'd soon have to return to, her tiny apartment, her mother's worried eyes, the restaurant's greasy counters. But a dangerous part of her wished it could last. And then it broke. It began with a phone call. Khalid had stepped out onto the balcony, his voice low but sharp in Arabic. Alina, curled on the sofa with a borrowed book, tried not to listen, but certain words cut through whether she wanted them to or not. The girl. She knew too much. Find out who sent her. Her stomach tightened. He was talking about her. She set the book down, every muscle rigid. For a moment, she told herself she must be mistaken. But when she glanced at the reflection in the window, she saw his face, grim, suspicious, the face of a man bracing for betrayal. Her heart sank. Even now, after everything, he still didn't trust her. When he came back inside, his expression softened at the sight of her. You should rest, he said gently. Tomorrow will be calmer. But Alina couldn't hold it in. You think I was sent here? The words froze him mid-step. What? You think I'm part of it, she pressed, her voice trembling. The scam. The men. You think I'm one of them? His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking. He said nothing. The silence was louder than any accusation. Tears pricked her eyes. After everything, after I saved you, after I told you the truth, you still think I'm lying? Khalid's gaze was hard, his voice clipped. I have learned the cost of trusting too easily. I cannot afford to make that mistake again. Her chest constricted. So I'm just another mistake waiting to happen? You appeared out of nowhere, he snapped. A girl no one noticed, suddenly speaking fluent Arabic at the exact moment I was being deceived. Do you not see how it looks? Alina flinched as if he had struck her. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them vibrated with hurt and rage and something far deeper, something neither wanted to admit. Finally, Alina whispered, I thought you saw me. Not just the waitress. Not just the girl who doesn't belong. But me. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Khalid's voice stopped her. If you walk out now, you may not be safe. She spun, tears streaking her cheeks. I was never safe. Not in this world. Not with you. And then she was gone. The slam of the door echoed through the suite like a gunshot. Khalid stood frozen, the anger draining from his body, leaving only emptiness. She was right. He had seen her, truly seen her, in ways he hadn't let himself see anyone in years. And yet, when the moment came, he chose suspicion over trust. Just as he always did. Because trust, for him, was death. And now, it felt like death anyway. Alina's footsteps echoed down the hotel's gleaming corridor. Her chest heaved, her vision blurred with tears. She barely noticed the stares of guests or the concerned glance of a maid. Outside, the night air hit her like ice. She pulled her jacket tight and started walking, no destination in mind, only the need to put distance between herself and the man who had ripped her open only to doubt her. But distance wasn't safety. A black car idled across the street. She didn't notice it at first, not until two men stepped out, their movements too deliberate, their eyes too sharp. Her blood ran cold. It was them. The scammers. Panic surged, but before she could run, one of them stepped into her path, smiling too wide. Miss, he said smoothly in accented English. We've been looking for you. Alina's heart pounded. She tried to slip past, but his hand shot out, gripping her arm. You were very clever at the restaurant. Very brave. But bravery can be dangerous. She yanked free and bolted down the street, her breath ragged, footsteps slapping against the pavement. Shouts followed. Heavy footsteps gave chase. Her mind screamed only one name. Khalid. Back in the suite, Khalid stared at the door she had left through. He should let her go. She had nothing to do with his world, and dragging her further into it was cruel. And yet, something gnawed at him. An unease that refused to leave. When his phone buzzed with a call from his bodyguard downstairs, the words chilled him. Sir. The girl. She's being followed. Khalid didn't think. He moved. The streets blurred as he raced in his car, his driver pushing through traffic. The city lights smeared into streaks of color, his pulse hammering in time with the engine. Don't be too late. Don't let her disappear, too. The thought was unbearable. Alina stumbled into a narrow alley, her lungs burning. Trash cans loomed, graffiti screamed from brick walls. She pressed against the shadows, heart hammering, listening to footsteps close in. "You can't run forever," one of the men called out in Arabic. Her body shook. She whispered back in the same language, "Then I'll fight." The footsteps grew louder. A hand reached for her shoulder. And headlights exploded into the alley. A black car screeched to a halt, and Khalid stepped out like a storm unleashed. "Touch her," he growled in Arabic, his voice low and lethal, "and you die." The men froze, caught between fight and flight. Khalid's guards spilled out of the car behind him, weapons drawn just enough to make their intentions clear. The scammers retreated, muttering curses, disappearing into the night like rats. And then it was quiet. Only Alina's ragged breathing filled the alley. Khalid turned to her. In the harsh headlights, she looked smaller than ever, her face streaked with tears, her eyes wide with fear and fury. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. She shook her head violently, backing away from him. "Don't. Alina." "No." Her voice broke, raw. "You don't get to rescue me after doubting me. You don't get to pretend you care when you made me feel like nothing." His chest tightened. "I do care." "Then why didn't you believe me?" Her voice shattered. "Why does no one ever believe me?" The words ripped through the night, cutting deeper than any blade. And for the first time, Khalid had no answer. They stood there in the broken light of the alley, two people who wanted nothing more than to reach for each other, but who were trapped by wounds too deep to bridge. Finally, Alina turned away, her shoulders shaking. "Just let me go," she whispered. Khalid's throat burned with words he couldn't force past his pride, his fear, his pain. And so he watched her walk away, the distance between them heavier than any wall. For the first time in years, Sheikh Khalid felt powerless. And for the first time ever, Alina felt truly alone. When trust is broken, is love still possible, or does suspicion kill it for good? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. The night they chose each other, neither could sleep. Alina lay on her narrow bed, phone still warm in her hand, heart still trembling with the weight of a single word, "Okay." Across the city, Khalid stood at his balcony, the cold wind rushing through his robes, staring at the stars with something he hadn't felt in years, hope. The next evening, Alina stood outside the restaurant where everything had begun. The neon sign flickered faintly, the smell of grilled meat and fried onions clinging to the night air. Her co-workers had teased her when she left early, saying she looked nervous, like she had a date. She didn't answer them. This wasn't a date. It was something bigger. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and there he was, Sheikh Khalid, not in a polished robe or guarded expression, but in simple clothes, a dark jacket and open collar. He looked human, vulnerable. And when his eyes found hers, his chest visibly rose, as though he'd been holding his breath until that moment. "Alina," he said softly. She swallowed. "You came." "Always," he replied. They walked side by side down the quiet street, neither speaking at first. The silence wasn't cold anymore, it was thick, full, waiting to be broken. Finally, Alina whispered, "Why me? Out of all the people in the world, why do you care about me?" Khalid stopped walking. He turned to her, his eyes steady, voice low. "Because when everyone else saw only a waitress, you saw a man about to be deceived. Because you spoke truth when it cost you everything. And because, Alina, when I am with you, I am not Sheikh Khalid. I am simply a man. And I have not felt that in a very long time." Her throat ached. She blinked back tears, whispering, "And when I am with you, I don't feel invisible anymore." Their eyes locked, and for the first time, there was no fear between them. Khalid led her to a small cafe, not the luxury of his world but a quiet place tucked between shops. They sat by the window, cups of steaming mint tea between them. No guards, no wealth, no power, just two people, stripped bare of everything except honesty. Khalid reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. A small, worn bracelet. Alina stared at it. "It belonged to my wife," he said quietly. "She wore it the night he trailed off, his eyes shadowed. Then, slowly, he met her gaze. "I have carried it as a reminder of what I lost. But I do not want my life defined only by loss anymore." He slid the bracelet across the table toward her. "I am not asking you to replace her. I am asking you to walk beside me, as yourself. To help me live again." Alina's hands shook as she touched the bracelet. The metal was cool, the weight startling. Tears blurred her vision. Khalid. He reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You owe me nothing. If you cannot trust me yet, I will wait. But I needed you to know my heart. Her lips trembled. For so long, no one had given her anything without strings. No one had offered her a choice that honored her worth. And now, here it was. Her choice. She closed her fingers around the bracelet, pressing it to her chest. I don't know if I can be enough for your world, she whispered. Khalid's voice was firm. My world has never been enough for me without you in it. The words shattered the last of her defenses. Her tears fell freely as she leaned forward, her forehead resting against his hand. His thumb brushed gently across her knuckles, a silent vow passing between them. For the first time, she let herself believe she was chosen. Not by accident. Not by pity. But by love. Weeks passed, and their bond grew, not in grand gestures, but in the small moments that mattered. Khalid accompanied her back to the restaurant one evening, not as a billionaire flaunting power, but as a man sitting in a corner booth, quietly proud to watch her work. The staff whispered and stared, but Alina walked taller that night, no longer shrinking from the world's gaze. He invited her to his world too, not the glittering banquets, but the quiet evenings on his balcony, where they shared stories of their childhoods, laughed over clumsy English idioms, argued about music, and sometimes just sat in silence, watching the city breathe. She teased him once about his brooding expressions. You should smile more, she said, poking his arm. Only if you do, he replied, and for once, they both laughed without the shadow of sorrow. But the world didn't let them live untouched. The men who had tried to scam Khalid reappeared in headlines, their empire exposed and crumbling. Some journalists speculated about the mysterious waitress who had foiled a multimillion-dollar fraud. Paparazzi hounded her, flashing cameras in her face, shouting questions. Alina's old fears surged back. What if I don't belong here? What if I ruin him? One night, overwhelmed, she told Khalid, maybe it's better if I disappear. If I go back to being invisible. His jaw tightened. He cupped her face in his hands, eyes fierce. Listen to me, Alina. You are not invisible. Not to me. Not anymore. And I will never let the world make you feel that way again. Her tears fell as she nodded, finally believing him. Months later, Khalid hosted a small gathering, not a lavish gala, but a dinner with close friends and family. He introduced Alina not as a guest, not as an employee, but as the woman who had saved his life. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room, but Khalid didn't flinch. He stood tall, his hand entwined with hers, pride radiating from him. Alina's heart pounded, but for once, she didn't shrink from the attention. She met their eyes and lifted her chin, the bracelet glinting on her wrist. And when Khalid whispered, "You belong here," she believed it. Late that night, after the guests had gone, Khalid and Alina returned to the balcony where so much of their story had unfolded. The city stretched endless before them, lights shimmering like stars brought down to earth. Alina leaned against the railing, her hair lifted by the breeze. Khalid stood behind her, his arms circling her waist, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. For a long time, they just breathed together, the silence full and warm. Finally, Alina whispered, "Do you ever think about how it all started? A scam. A restaurant. Me telling you, this is a fake." Khalid chuckled softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. The greatest fortune of my life began with those words. Her eyes closed, her smile trembling with joy. "I love you," she whispered. Khalid's arms tightened around her. "And I you. More than all the wealth in this world." In that moment, neither was invisible, neither was untouchable. They were just two hearts that had chosen each other against all odds. And this time nothing, not fear, not pride, not the world, could break them. Sometimes the hardest choice is the simplest, to let go of fear and choose love. So tell me, if you were in Alina's place, would you risk your heart again after betrayal? Or would you walk away to protect yourself? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.